Welcome to Global Business News TV. As you can see, we're currently in the Global HR newsroom, and this is a town hall about managing, leading people, and how do you motivate and how do you mentor high achievers. Brenda Levis is a high achiever, and welcome to the talk show. Um, just before I push the button, you were explaining to the guys here on screen about what NYC Navigator does. I also want to commend you on finding and hiring and developing Alexa. And this is not a robot. This is a real person. Yeah, and what is her title now?
Yeah.
Is she president yet?
She will tell you she is president, yes, but I noticed that everything is transcribed, so I have to be careful about what
Yeah,
I,
I know.
but no, I have a young lady on my team that is,
A Gen Xer, right?
she's like right between Gen X and well, actually she's Gen Y. I'm Gen X, she's Gen
No,
Y.
oh,
Um,
Gen Z, or close.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
right. Yeah.
But she is definitely a high achiever. So when I saw the subject of this meeting, I thought, oh boy, I better get in there and listen. Uh, yeah,
That's great.
we've given her a lot of wonderful opportunities, taken her to conferences all over the globe and given her a lot of freedom. So I think she's had a great run, but you're always thinking in the back of your head, what do I have to do to keep her engaged? And what do I have to do to develop her so that talent that I've invested all this money and time into doesn't go off and help somebody else's company that I
Yeah.
think we're.
And thank you for bringing it to our meeting in New York last fall, what was hosted by Ernst& Young in their Global Center. And she participated fully. And our keynoter, Ken Oler, Dr. Ken Oler, took us through design thinking, and she was right in the middle of that. And that was her soup, if you will.
Mhm. Exactly.
Okay, Brenda, I want you to meet my good friends here. They've been on several shows. Uh, Ken Lloyd, Dr. Ken Lloyd is in LA, and Stephen Howard is currently in Phoenix, and he's an author of 23 books and got another one in the oven. And we were just together yesterday in Phoenix, and here I am today in Palm Desert. And yesterday when we arrived here, Stephen, it was 121 degrees.
Toasty, toasty.
Oh my God. Okay, and from Orange County, California, here's my friend Christian.
Hi.
Welcome. And so, Christian, why don't you self-intro and meet Brenda?
Yeah, love to. So Brenda, we're in similar spheres here because I've worked in global mobility for the last 20 years.
Hmm.
And I'm familiar with NYC Navigator. I have never met you, but I'm familiar with the company name.
Okay.
And I'm currently looking for a new opportunity or new projects after having left Lexicon Relocation, Sterling Lexicon,
Uh-huh.
after 14 years as a consultant and then later operations manager there. So yeah, I'd love to talk to you separately for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Okay,
Nice.
use the chat to exchange,
Well,
LinkedIn. Mark Colo, are you going to be visible?
I don't know. I got to figure this out.
No, it's a beautiful picture, lovely face.
Well, it's
But
pretty standard. I don't
okay,
have. I'm expressionless, I think. But okay,
yeah,
I'll work on that, Ed. I'll see what
yeah. Okay, good. And then I want you to self-intro.
okay.
I will um,
Yeah.
briefly say that Mark and I have been really good friends for a very long time because of the relocation industry. But he's now in retirement and moved out of Orange County up to St. George, living the good life. So, Mark, why don't you talk more about
I would
you?
love to, Brenda. I actually had my own relocation management company years and years ago. It was called Trans Safari. Trans for transferee, Safari, you're going on a journey. It's a jungle out there, and we're your guide. So that was a lot of fun for me to do that. And I had a real estate broker's license and
Mhm.
had all the tools to get referral fees and run that whole part of the business. So it was just a fun time, fun and a learning time for me. But I've been primarily in the transportation side of the business for, I want to say it's at least 50 years, long, long time.
Yes.
And did some great things. In the last half decade of my career, I focused on moving laboratories, scientific laboratories. So I was moving individuals that were going to get the Nobel Prize for the cure, for finding a cure for Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and all these other neuro diseases. So that was also very learning time for me in my career. And I had a client, Diane, called me up and she said, Mark, I need your help. I said, yeah, Diane, what's up? And she says, well, I got to move an executive from Georgetown University out here to the University of California, Irvine. And this guy's going to be my boss's boss. And if you mess it up, I'll lose my job.
Mhm.
That's just how she put it to me. And so I thought, well, no sweat. I said, no sweat, Diane, I'll take care of it. So I hung up the phone with her and I called the transferee, and it's a gentleman named Howard Federoff. He graduated from Albert Einstein University in neuroscience. I don't know how you even get into that university, but I'm sure it's not easy. And so I got to know him during the course of his relocation, and everything went well. He had 40,000 brain samples of individuals who passed away with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's.
Hmm.
So pretty amazing that in itself. So, but anyhow, I did that. I moved after his move. His move went without a hitch, no problems. But after that, I moved another 100 scientists also involved in with precious belongings they had, and every one of those relocations went without a hitch as well. Which is, and I tell everybody that that's beyond coincidence. That's a miraculous thing to be able to say.
So, Mark, let me ask you,
Yes.
obviously you're a high achiever in your field and was, and you've been doing other things. You've been a TEDx speaker and you've been an author of 2 books and founded or co-founded a wonderful charity, Find Neuro Help, and you created a service bureau, an advisory service for people and families who are impacted by neurodegenerative diseases such as Parkinson's and ALS and Alzheimer's and others I can't pronounce. And Mark was attacked by Parkinson's, 18 years ago? And
Wow.
he is bold enough to come on my TV shows about 25 times and talk about Parkinson's. And yesterday's show was just terrific, the best yet, Mark. And thank you for helping me put that together yesterday.
Thank
And
you.
that program just completed rendering uh, about 1 hour ago. And so I'll begin distributing it when we conclude this
Can't wait
program.
to see it, Ed. Thank you.
Yeah, I know it came out really good. And Stephen Howard, please meet Brenda.
Hey, Brenda, I didn't catch where you're based, Brenda.
Hi, Stephen. I'm based in New York City.
In New York City. Wow. Okay.
I split my time between there and Rhode Island, but primarily I'm in New York City.
And originally from New Hampshire, right?
I'm originally from New Hampshire, yes. I also
Yeah.
lived overseas for about 10 years on and off in Europe, but have been back for quite some time now, unfortunately.
I lived in Singapore for 21 years, Australia for 12, Mexico for 3. So I spent most of my adult life outside the United States.
Fantastic experiences.
So his books are business books and about leadership. And last year you published Humany, Humony. And why don't you tell Brenda and our audience about Humany and Humany leadership?
Okay, happy to, Ed. Thanks for the opportunity. Human is the word I created, combining human, Humanity and Harmony. And interestingly, when I went and did some research for the book and was talking to people, asked them to describe what does harmony look like in your workplace, and they all laughed at me. Said there's no such thing as harmony. We focus on getting results and we focus on objectives but I've known a few organizations that had harmony, and to me, harmony in the workplace is, we've all been in flow at some point. Often not in the workplace. Sometimes it's our hobbies. I mean, I've got a friend who rebuilds antique cars, and when he goes in his garage, his work, his wife says he totally loses track of time. And I know I do the same thing when I'm writing. I can write for 3.5 hours and suddenly look up and say, oh my gosh, the morning is gone. So flow in the workplace to me harmony in the workplace to me is like flow, where everything's clicking, people are working together, they're communicating, they're collaborating, no one's withholding information. It has psychological safety to it. People are afraid to make or admit to mistakes that they've made. They learn from mistakes and they share the mistakes they've made, so others will learn and not replicate or repeat those mistakes. So human leadership for me is all about being a people-centric leader and bringing harmony and well-being into the workplace.
And recently, you and our mutual friend Ali Shami published a book. Why don't you describe that, and if you could hold it up to the camera?
Okay, I'll put it on the. You want?
Oh, good. Yeah, sure. Yeah,
okay.
share it.
Open up a file here, and you can
Yeah.
use that.
Just-
This book, Brenda, is for your clients who are outside the United States. So as you'll see here, as soon as I pull it up, partnering successfully with American firms. So Ali is born in Lebanon, moved to the United States around age 20, and has spent the rest of his life in the United States, is now a citizen, and was a senior manager at Boeing Corporation for 24 years. And as I mentioned, I've spent most of my career outside the United States. So we have experienced what it's like for companies to try to understand the American business culture and how that frustrates many people from outside the United States and dealing with that American business mentality. Now, a good example of that is, even though like I said, I lived in Singapore for 21 years, obviously still American. My first 2 jobs were with American companies, and I had that American business mindset. So one time I got pulled aside by somebody because our meeting ended early, and I said, oh, I'll go see if I can get an earlier flight back home. And the guy looked at me like, why don't you just spend the extra day here? I can take you to museums tomorrow. I can show you around. And we have a beautiful national park about 30 minutes outside the city. And I said, no, I really need to go back to the office. I got work to do. And then I saw the disappointment on his face. And I realized then that, people take such pride in their companies, their countries, their cultures. And I was offending the individual by kind of indicating that I wasn't interested in that. I was putting business before the relationship, whereas most of the world, a great part of the world, puts relationships first and then business second. And so we described that in the book, and I changed my attitude, and I'm not afraid to take that odd day off when I'm traveling internationally and get to know people, get to know the culture, get to know the food, and hopefully, if I'm in the right country, get to know their wine.
That's terrific. Well, thanks for sharing that. But before you take it down, talk about the background. It looks like a jigsaw puzzle.
Well, it is, Ed, and interestingly, I use a graphic artist in Mexico City for my book covers, and one of my sideline businesses, I help other people produce their books. I can edit them, I can ghostwrite them, or I can help them with the pre-publication process. And so I've used him for other people's books as well, including Mark's book. One of Mark's books was done by the same graphic designer. Anyway, when we were talking, when I briefed him, we were sitting having tacos and beer in Mexico City, and I was describing the book to him. He said, oh, this is great. I said, why? He says, because I find dealing with Americans puzzling. He said, you're one of the exceptions because you're more international than American. And I said, okay. And I said, play with that idea. And so he came up with this puzzle background. And if you notice in the subtitle, how to work effectively with U.S. companies and business people, there's some missing pieces there. And so kind of subliminally, cover design is to indicate that this book has some of the answers for you, that it will help you fill in that puzzle about how to partner successfully with American firms. So that's the story behind the cover.
Okay, and now tell us about the new one that's just coming.
Well, the new one, I don't want to say too much about it, honestly. It will come out next month, but it's going to take the humanity leadership concept and apply it to humanity. The premise of the book is we live in such a divisive world that we've lost some of our humanity. We don't interact with people very well on a one-to-one basis, even with strangers. One of the interesting things I've noticed back in the United States is how many people walk with their head down, and not always having a phone. Just people walk the head down. They don't want to make eye contact. And in other parts of the world, even if somebody's on their phone, whatever, they're still looking up most of the time. They're kind of doing a head nod. They look down, they look up. But in America, so many people walk and hunched over with their head down. And it's like no one wants to make contact with anybody anymore. So that book is going to talk about how to take this concept of humanity into your personal life. And the goal is, we all have the agency to create a better world for our children and grandchildren to inherit. So the goal of this book is to encourage people to use that agency, even in their small parts of the world. I'm not suggesting any of us on this call cannot solve world peace. We can't solve the Middle East crisis. We can't solve world hunger, but we can certainly make our nation.
Unknown caller.
We can certainly make our parts of the world better. We can certainly interact with each other with more respect, more compassion, more kindness. And that's the gist of that book.
Well, thank you for sharing all that. Dr. Ken Lloyd, you're working on a new book. Why don't you tell our audience about that?
Sure. First, hi, Brenda. Nice to meet you. I like the visual behind you. It looks great. Yeah, I was asked by the folks at Wiley to do a new edition of a book I wrote for them 15 years ago on performance appraisal. And it's performance appraisals and phrases for dummies. And so that's what I've been working on, getting that all updated. Obviously, appraisals have changed dramatically in 15 years from this once a year disciplinary feedback session that's stressful for everybody to continuous feedback, more forward focused, dealing with employee growth and development, career development, and providing actual feedback that people can use to improve. And no surprises, all the angst is eliminated. It's totally different from what it used to be. So I was glad to have the opportunity to do that. That book should be out in December from what they're saying. And it's been a fun project, and they're a terrific publisher to work with. So that helps as well. I see somebody. Hi, Atika.
Hi, Ken.
Atika is global HR and global mobility expert for a large worldwide company. She is based in Sweden. And thank you so much for coming on the show again and for sending that information. And if you'd like to display it in a couple of minutes, please use my screen share. So, Atika, would you please introduce yourself much better than I tried to?
Yes. So I'm also a link maker, Edwin.
Well, that's great.
Yes.
Yes, I
So
know you have brought me together with other people, and thank you.
yes. So but in my job also so I have been part of global mobility since 2015, and I'm working as an international assignment partner, where we are. Where my job means that I am partnering with the business for strategic decision making and consultation and advisory role. At the same time, I am involved with the assignments itself, which is the heart and soul of global mobility. I can't be away from assignments. And then obviously navigating from the start of the assignment, the end-to-end process with the help of some of our providers. Yeah, so just taking it successfully from the start of the assignment to the end of the assignment.
So, Atika, we'll display a really beautiful slide in just a couple of minutes, and then we could all discuss about this. So the theme of today's show is how do we mentor high achievers? Well, all of us on the screen are high achievers, but of various kinds. So I don't know if I could ever manage anybody who's on the show. So I just stick to my knitting here, doing talk shows and occasionally in-person shows. And sometimes I try to meld them together, and we've learned that that doesn't work so well some of the time. So I'm still learning about how to do that. But more about me later. Let's talk about who's on the screen here, Atika. First, want you to meet Brenda Levis, and
Hi,
she's in New York City, and she's the owner of many years of a very successful destination management company, destination services, called NYC for New York City, NYC Navigator. That's a great name, isn't it? No, that's what she does. And also on the screen, wearing a blue shirt, is my friend Christian. And he's based in Southern California. He's been in the mobility management side of things for many years. And I'm going to let you talk uh, better at that, Christian. Why don't you self-intro quickly?
Oh, sure. So I was born in Germany and grew up in Switzerland, moved to Southern California 24 years ago after also living in the UK for a year as an exchange student. And I've had a 20-year career in global mobility, working first for Cardis, the big one at the time, and then for Lexicon Relocation, Sterling Lexicon. And Atika and I we've been on at least one of your shows together, Ed, but we've also crossed paths separately now on LinkedIn, which is very joyful for me that we comment on each other's stuff and things like that.
Yes, and
Okay.
I gain a lot from you, Christian. Your
Thank
insights are
you.
amazing. Yes.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that compliment. Thank you.
And the whole world will
Thank
see
you.
all this, remember. Okay, Dr. Ken Lloyd is an author and a trainer and was in a senior HR role for a large company for 18 years or so. Ken, why don't you self-intro better than I could do that?
Sure. Just a quick overview. I graduated from UC Berkeley with a bachelor's and got my master's and PhD from UCLA in org development and org behavior. I was in consulting for several years, and all along the way writing various business books, non-academic, more on the readable side, all the way out to a title called Jerks at Work. That's how academic the book was. And as mentioned earlier, have a book on performance appraisals that will be coming out as well. Used to teach part-time over in the MBA program at UCLA at the Anderson School, and then joined one of my client companies, a manufacturer of medical apparel, and did that as a VP of employee planning and development for around 18 years. So kind of wanted that inside internal experience as well as consulting and traveling all over and working with different companies. And now continuing back in my consulting, coaching, training area and business writing. And there we are. And
Okay, thank you.
at the outset of the conversation here, Ed had mentioned that he was in Phoenix yesterday and it was 121 degrees. And I thought that I had won that contest out here in the San Fernando Valley where we hit 113, but no, apparently not. Oh my gosh, it's just ridiculous.
I have a mere 107.
Oh yeah, nothing. Go out and
I'm
take a
freezing.
Oh my God. Okay, Stephen Howard is an author of 23 books, Atika. I think you may have met him once before, and he's
Yes.
working on the next one. So Joanna and I were in Phoenix for a couple of days getting our investment properties ready for the season, which begins Sunday. Um, and we met up with Stephen, and we had a delightful time. And he introduced me to this Zinfandel, which was we quickly drank that bottle. Yes, it was great. And so then we drove across the desert on I-10 into Palm Desert here today, and we're getting this home ready for the Canadians to come back starting in late October.
No birds.
And then it's so hot outside that I think we're going to go back to San Diego tomorrow, but to get some cool air. So, Tico, could you upload that slide and take us through it? It's just with
Yeah.
with everybody's so steeped in their professions, this should be a very lively conversation. Okay.
Yes.
When you're ready.
Yeah, let me just share my screen.
Okay.
There.
So all of this leads to how to mentor, how to lead, how
Yeah.
to further develop high achievers. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So my take on this topic was from the other side. Of course, there we talk about how to creating I've written it here, growth mindset, and how to develop their emotional intelligence, how to give regular feedbacks. These are all very important, and of course it is all required for mentoring a high achiever. And and but what I have seen in my years of working is that the high achievers are also the triggers of people knowing that they're heading towards a burnout are not recognized. So that is where I would put a lot of stress on mentoring focused on preventing that to happen. Because any person in the organization, whether it's a recognized high achiever or not, everybody is really important, because the cost to the company of hiring a new person, taking them through the process, and them becoming productive at some point is already high. And then we have high achievers who are already bringing in so much to the organization, because generally the high achievers, they create this aura around them, and people kind of emulate what the precedents that they set. So it is not just them being the high achievers, they actually become the motivators for others. And if they falter, then everything else also is affected. So your panel is always so great. And why I wanted to put your point was that there are so many of us who are leaders and have so much more perspective. And I wanted to put these points out there for us to discuss them. And so, yeah, put it down there, statistically, almost 20% of the high achievers have burnout sometime
Yeah,
in
but
their
I'm
career.
broadcasting right now. Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh,
Yes.
okay, good.
For me, the focus of mentoring should be to create an environment of honest failure. We should not put that pressure on the high achievers to always justify and that they are valuable only if they achieve. And it's not realistic. They will be failures. Then how to manage those failures is also part of mentoring, should be part of mentoring. Also, as a high achiever, once you are done with a project successfully or anything, any task that you've done successfully, you go into that phase of post-accomplishment phase. And that is also that is a phase that needs to be handled well as well. Because there are high goals to be achieved, they're achieved, now what? And it doesn't mean that a new project needs to be given. It just means that the post-accomplishment phase should also be sorry, managed very well. And then we talk about imposter syndrome a lot, and that is quite a lot seen in high achievers, because the insecurity or the doubts creep in very easily for high achievers also, where they feel that until unless that they are performing or they are deeply into something, if they're not being praised or valued, then they or if they have like, if they are not doing so well, then every time this fear is creeping on them that, oh, people will get to know I'm not so good after all. And then that actually, it's a two-edged sword. So it keeps them going at it. At the same time, it can lead to their demotivation and burnout. What I'm like in going on this, but any input from up till now on these points? I would like to engage some inputs.
Absolutely. Dr. Ken Lloyd?
That's interesting. I remember reading about high achievers. It's interesting when they look back on their work, they tend to think of what they didn't do well. Even if they've done an amazing job on a project, the thinking is, I could have done this, or I left that out, I should have done. That's that constant need to keep achieving. But you're right. What happens after, literally and figuratively, you've walked on the moon? You've met this major goal, a super high achievement, and you're so right. From that point, it's very easy for them to get distracted, have doubts. Where do I go from here? I've met it. And as managers, we want to try to keep that need to achieve alive and moving forward. And that's really, as you said, with two-way communication, regular feedback, and what we call feed forward, to help them learning, building, growing, and sensing that they're respected and supported, because they are super valuable assets in an organization, and they really help drive departments in the organization as well. And if we see them having achieved a particularly great goal, the concept would then be, let's work with them to help put them back on the next path, and to be ready for the next great play. And that's part of what we want to do as managers. So again, with support, with respect, with trust, with understanding them as individuals, what are their true needs to achieve? What are those really focused on? So these points that you've mentioned here are critical, very important for effective management and team building.
Thank you. So Stephen, have you heard of, instead of feedback, feed forward?
Yeah, that's a terminology that came up a few years ago. Talking about, the other one was fail fast or fail forward, I think was the phrase, make mistakes and learn from it, move on. I think all feedback should be forward based. I mean, feedback should not be just look at what you did wrong, and here are the mistakes you made. It should be, hey, this is less than optimal. What can we do to make it more optimal? So it should be, it is, feedback should be forward thinking, because you want to do improvement. Just an aside, and I personally, and this is personal, but in my books, I advocate taking the phrases positive and negative and throwing them out of your vocabulary. Because in my view, my philosophy, if your intention of feedback is to help somebody improve their performance, improve the results, improve their behavior, improve whatever, there's nothing negative about that. And so if your intention is to help another person improve, why think of it as negative feedback or so-called constructive feedback? So the people I coach, I've changed their vocabulary completely when it comes to feedback.
Okay, Christian.
What's particularly interesting about what we're talking about now is the way that we're looking at the end of a project and what happens afterwards. And when I was preparing for this session, I wouldn't have thought of it that way. So Stephen, when you mentioned flow earlier, and I saw Atika's slide and heard her talk about it, that was the first thing that came to mind. That flow ends when you have completed that, significant project or achieved this significant thing in work or in life. And I know enough about brain chemistry to know that there's hormones involved, and they're being taken away from you, and you may have withdrawal. And all of this leads into the discussion of what are we doing with these people afterwards, and that's where Ken's statement came in. So overall, it's a very interesting way to look at this, to not even look at how do I mentor them, but what do I do with them when they're done doing the great thing that they've just done.
Okay, Brenda, is this helpful to you?
It is helpful. I'll take all the information that I could get and all the suggestions that I could get. So it's lovely to have this expertise, and I'm listening very intently for pearls of wisdom here.
So, it's really interesting to see this about managing imposter syndrome. I would think that high achievers don't have that worry. But of course,
I think they have it
it's
the
wrong.
most.
Yeah, the
Yes.
most. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think
Oh,
most
absolutely.
CEOs have it in the business groups that I belong to. It's definitely a challenge for CEOs, especially when they're getting started.
Sometimes I think imposter is my middle name.
Mark Colo,
Yes, sir.
what say you about high achievers? You being one yourself, who mentored you? Can you think back?
I think my father was a big part of my achievements, or if you want to call them overachievements. I'm kind of astounded when you went off all that list of everything I've done. I'm thinking, gee, I can't wait to see what I'm going to do next, So, but my father was relentless on me. I mean, he used to say, "Don't call me dad." He said, "Call me Rumpelstiltskin." Now, that sounds pretty sad when you think about it, but that had an impact on me to a certain degree. And I know he was being jovial and trying to be fun loving. And, he used to call me Marcus the Carcass. But you only go to a certain degree with that when you're talking to young children. And most of my challenges happen between age 3 and age 6. I don't know how I got through those years because it was not easy. We all have our phobias that we have. We all have our worries, our anxiety. We all have anxiety. There's no one on the planet that doesn't have some anxiety. It's all part of life. But the acronym I like to throw out, and I made it up when I gave my TEDx talk, is FAD, F-A-D. And FAD stands for fear, apathy, and doubt. And you look at our kids today in society, you talk about fear, apathy, and doubt. I mean, we never had to go quite through a pandemic like these kids have recently. There's a lot to fear about, to have fear toward, what's happening in the world today, elections and all kinds of things that you don't know exactly which way it's going to go, but it'll go some direction. And but I think it's a challenging time for us to live right now. And I agree with Howard about his attitude of positivity and optimism and all that. It's the word depression unscrambled spells I pressed on. And I like that statement because, we have to press on when we get into some difficult situations. So
Steve,
Go ahead.
yeah, Stephen.
I love that, Mark. I've heard you say that before. It's a great acronym, taking that word, mixing up. I have two comments. What Atika was talking about and a little bit, and I think people think about feedback as only the formal process, whether it's the annual review or a sit down, whether it's quarterly or half. But feedback should be an ongoing process. And so one of the phrases I use often, particularly on longer projects, I mean, if it's 6 weeks or longer, I don't think leaders should wait until the end of the project to provide any feedback, and to share feedback is the other phrase I use. You don't give feedback because that's kind of a one-way connotation. You share feedback. You want to create a dialogue around it. But my phrase is recognize effort, reward result. And so if it's a 6 week or longer project, I'm coaching people. You should be giving feedback throughout that process now. Because imagine you're working on something for 4 months and you don't hear anything about the effort you're putting in until at the end of the project. That can be demotivating. That's one of the reasons projects go off stray after 80%, because people put so much effort into it and they're not being recognized. The other thing Brenda mentioned early, there's a phrase now, Brenda, might help you a bit called Boomerang Employees. I don't think you should be worried about, I mean, you should be concerned about training somebody, investing time and money in their development, but I wouldn't be overly worried about what if they leave. Because they can always come back unless for one reason they leave on a sour note. But often in today's world, they become your future partners. I mean, I coached an individual who left my organization. I continue to coach him for 6 years, and he at 2 different companies to help develop him. And today, he wanted coaching on marketing and didn't know anything about marketing. He was a research guy. Today, he's a professor of marketing at the University of Singapore. It's not that university, but one of the top 3 universities in Singapore. He also teaches marketing at INSEAD. Now, that's not because of me. I just put him on the right track and helped him, but he deserves all the credit for that. But to continue developing people is one of those things that makes you feel really good about yourself. And it's a way to happiness, kind of an indirect. I mean, I'm so happy when I think about him and his success and the fact that I got to contribute a little bit to that success. So wouldn't worry about investing in people with the fear that they might leave. So I just want to say that.
If I can just add one point to what Stephen is saying, in performance appraisals today, the phrase continuous feedback is at the heart of it, so that employees are not being left out there and then suddenly months later they're given some information on how they did. Just from the behavioral standpoint, if we want people to learn, the closer the feedback is to the behavior in question, the more likely it will actually have an impact to get people to basically build, change, develop. When it's drawn out for months, the feedback becomes rather irrelevant. People forget. So continuous feedback and tying that in with obviously development, career development, and as Stephen mentioned, helping people learn and grow with that kind of information is really the objective. It's not a disciplinarian kind of function at all. It's really thinking of oneself in the managerial position as a coach. That's really a key underlying factor here. And that's very different from someone standing up there intermittently showing up and telling people where they failed. In fact, the annual appraisals are really going away, and they're being replaced either by biannual or quarterly formal appraisals that are also supplemented with continuous feedback, two-way communication. It's a very different world, and it ties in with treating employees with respect, trust, understanding, and focusing on their futures.
What about the use of Zoom type dialogue rather than across the desk?
If you're asking me, it's fine. I mean, that's part of our world today. And the idea is to maintain contact and communication with the members of your team. And if it's virtual, it's virtual. Virtual is not as compelling or powerful as in person, but look how much better this is than a conference call that we used to have not that long ago. At least now we can see and get an idea as to how the interaction is going. It's not perfect, but it's better than the older technologies that we had. So if this is the reality, particularly with hybrid workplaces, this is certainly a positive step. Granted, not perfect, but frankly, what is today. So we do our best, but I think it's a major leap in understanding people that we're working with and working more effectively and productively with them.
Thank
Yeah,
you. Yes, Christian. I'm sorry.
So my team was spread out between San Diego and Connecticut. And so when I gave performance appraisals, it was by definition with Zoom or Teams. And yeah, I thought the same thing, Ken, much better than a conference call. But I'm so glad I never had to do performance appraisal with a conference call. But I would have loved to have people sit there in person for sure, but wasn't feasible.
Yes, Atika.
No, I mean, you're all very senior. You have much more experience, but I can I can feel the difference. In my own career, I can the importance of feedback or feed forward, and the frequency of it rather than how it is done. Even if it is Zoom, but or Teams, but if it is done frequently, is more important than physically, if not done or not. But physically, like Christian said, it's not always feasible. We are all spread over throughout, I mean, all over the world. So yeah, I can say from my experience, a frequent feedback which I have started receiving recently is much better than the feedback like once a year or twice a year, which really didn't make sense. And it did lead to a lot of effort from my side to put in motivation to keep performing, to keep investing. It takes a lot from the employee to keep when you don't get that kind of feedback. But feedbacks are feedback or feed forward, anything, just any kind of input is so important for keeping up that motivation and drive.
So,
Atika,
yes, go ahead, please.
okay, so I was just wondering, Atika, do you ask for 180 feedback? Do you ask for feedback in the other direction from your high achievers?
Well, absolutely. Using 360 feedback, you want to have feedback from outsiders. If this person is managing a team anonymously, what are the employees saying about this individual? Sometimes there'll even be feedback from outsiders. If you're in a role where you're dealing with customers or other vendors, there can be feedback from them. The idea is to complete a full picture, if possible, of the employee. So a lot of companies are moving to 360. Employees are doing a self-eval, evaluations, if you will, feedback, if you will, from their peers, from their direct reports, as well as from outsiders to help, not to scold or say, here's all the stuff you're doing wrong, but here's a snapshot. And let's see how we can work with this to build and grow and develop and to be even stronger. And frankly, to achieve more. How can we set the stage for you to sense more achievement? Frankly, personal growth is tied in with achievement as well. So it's really all quite interrelated.
Okay, Christian.
One of the questions on the performance evaluation forms that I've had to use, this one I have actually liked, was how can I, as your manager, help you to get better at your job or to accomplish your goals, however it was formulated exactly. But what I liked about it was that it led into this 360 feedback in a very natural way. It wasn't, what do you think about me? Underling.
Yeah.
It was in the spirit of what Stephen talked about, this coaching, helping, assisting for you as a leader. That's part of your job, to do that and to do it well.
Here's a tip, Christian, to make that slightly more, actually not even slightly, highly more effective, is to rephrase that question. And this is what I call high impact questions. So phrase it like this: where are the 3 most important things I can do for you as your manager or as your leader to help? Because the way the question's phrased, like all questions, you get top of the mind, the surface thinking. But if you make them, this is what I call high impacts. It makes the person think, evaluate, analyze, and then figure out how they want to respond. There may be something that they may be comfortable responding, but that's okay. At least they've thought about it. But if you ask the 3 most important ways I can help you, the 3 most important things I can do, and give them time. This is not necessarily in the discussion. This is kind of in their preparation for the discussion. You'll get a lot better input from the people that you want to work with.
Thank you so much. There's ROI right there for this time this morning.
So do you want to show your slide, Christian?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So
let's see what that's doing. Atika, I really thank you for your time here.
It's interesting how in 2024, we're still struggling with the same things we were in 1994 when it comes to leading people. We just haven't learned. Or we haven't been taught, maybe.
Is it up?
Yes, it is. It's just hard to read. Maybe you can enlarge it a little bit.
But put it full screen.
Like that?
Oh, okay, that's it. Perfect.
All right. So interesting. Atika, well, first of all, yours is much deeper than mine here. But I also thought about a mentee who's outside of my organization, possibly. And as it happens, I have an hour and a half from now, I have a call with a mentee I haven't met yet. It's going to be our first call. And I met her through my LinkedIn network. So she has nothing to do with any of the places I've worked with. And I'm looking at this. First of all, you should be reliable and on time. I've had mentors who weren't, and that just really jeopardizes the whole thing. You need to set clear expectations as to how you can and cannot help them. In other words, if they are looking for you to solve all their problems, yeah, that's not how it's going to work. It's going to be as Stephen put it, putting them on the right track, right? That's what you want. What can you offer a high achiever? They already know what they're doing. So in other words, when you praise them, when you tell them what they've done right, be mindful of that. Then listen, let them talk, ask questions only for clarification purposes, and respond carefully and deliberately. It's not about you. It's very important. And sometimes I fall into that trap when I coach. It's not about me. It's about them. It's their time. Stephen, do you want to ask something right?
No, I'll wait for you to finish. Sorry, sir.
Okay. Then be prepared. That's another thing that I've had people that coached me weren't, and that was a problem. What did you talk about last time? What have they posted on LinkedIn? What did they share about their personal life that might impact your conversation today? An example, they're worried about their pet's health, and they're very preoccupied with that. And if you don't address that or don't.
Oh, we've lost your sound. Okay.
If you, is it back?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. If you're, if you don't show that you're aware of that's what top of mind for them, that's going to also jeopardize the session. And then we talked about the imposter syndrome already. High achievers often have a skewed perception of their strengths and weaknesses. For example, a lack of confidence that blocks their development. And I'm more than happy to say I'm very guilty of that. As I said earlier, imposter sometimes is my middle name. So you have to figure out as a coach what they cannot see about themselves, and you have to highlight it with an explanation as to why you appreciate their strengths. One of the things I learned as a manager is never just praise, oh, great job, but explain why you think it's a great job. It will be much more effective, and it will lead into the further discussion. And then that's something that Stephen was alluding to earlier. Be careful and positive when you discuss their weaknesses. Emphasize how they could reframe them into strengths, and tell them how work on their weaknesses, and I would avoid the word weaknesses, but this is among us, will make them stronger in their own development. And it's not because you said so. So you can't have that, military top-down approach in mentoring and coaching, I feel. Stephen?
This is very helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Christian.
Thank you.
Gaps is a better word than weaknesses. The other thing here, and you're right, Christian, sometimes they can't see their strengths, what they can't see about themselves, but also they don't know how to use their strengths to close
yeah.
their gaps. So I was coaching a woman a couple of weeks ago, and she's US based, and she was dealing with people in the Philippines and India. And she was got some feedback from the managers in particularly India that she was a bit harsh, bit curt, not friendly sort of thing. And so she said, what can I do? And we had talked the previous session about one of her strengths is she's great at problem solving. So as a coach, you don't necessarily give them the answer. So I turned it around and said, well, one of your strengths is problem solving. Why don't you look at this, evaluate this as a problem? And I talked about the differences in communicating with people in India and Philippines and in the US. And so I set that up for her. And then I said, now you see the situation. Now you have the context. How would you solve that problem? What could you do to break down some of those barriers that they're seeing? Because yes, you are direct, but you're not unfriendly. You've got a great smile, but you want to get right to the point where they don't. So think about it. So using her strength to help her close her own gaps is a really, people don't think about how to use their strengths enough, I think.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that.
Mark, do you want to add?
No, I just, one of my favorite courses I had in college was organizational behavior. I don't know, I'm sure many of you have had those courses, but I think they're very insightful. I learned quite a bit from about the differences between each of us, and how we could communicate more effectively and so on and so forth. But I just love those analytical type courses where it helps you look at where somebody else is coming from and maybe understanding them a little bit better in terms of how they're perceiving the situation around them. I had a boss as well. He was always saying to me, he says, "Mark, you know what I appreciate the most when somebody comes up and asks me about their performance." I says, "No, what is that?" He says, "I like it when they come up and they say," I'll use the name Gary as one example. Say that your boss is Gary. Gary, what is it that you feel that I could do more effectively to help the company? Just something like that, something like Howard mentioned earlier. But anyway, I think we can always ask more effective questions, think it through, and we can get more feedback. But just be open-minded. I try not to judge people too, because it's really easy to jump in your judgment wagon and you just start looking at what's wrong with a person or a situation. I try to give people the benefit of the doubt until they show me otherwise. So anyway.
Thank you, Christian, for bringing the
Yeah.
slide to the program here. So we're coming up to the hour here. We could continue, or we could do another, we can do another 10, 15 minutes if you want, or we can end it. So Brenda, with Alexa in mind, what kind of feedback does she give you? I may ask.
Nobody on my team is short of feedback or or opinions, which I appreciate. Yeah, I'm grateful that we have the kind of dynamic on my team that people aren't afraid to question how things are done, why we do them the way that we do. They bring terrific ideas to the table and they're heard. If an idea makes sense, we incorporate it and we incorporate it very quickly. So that's terrific. I just recently had a manager on my team that she'd been with me for a little over a year, and I went through the review process with some of her team where our management styles were very different, and that I grew up old school where feedback is feedback. Feedback is constructive feedback, and I feel a responsibility to help you and to develop you. Whereas I think she was coming more from a trophy culture that if you show up, you get the trophy. And she didn't want to provide feedback that could be construed as negative or saying something saying something that would make the employee feel badly or feel like they weren't perfect just at what they're doing or that they were underappreciated. So there's probably a happy medium between our two management styles. But I do definitely believe in pointing out for the benefit of the members of my team how we can develop them, I provide the tools as well to help develop them. But areas where they could improve. And also I'd really try and tap into with my team their interests. So if I've got somebody that I maybe gave up on initially, and then I got to know her a little bit better and started talking to her about her other interests. She was interested in social media. She was interested in helping out with events. And I got her into things that she was interested in. And all of a sudden she's shining. She's terrific. So if we hadn't had that conversation, I might have just had somebody who wasn't that productive in the role that they were hired for, and they either would have quit and gone off and been potentially bitter about it. And it would have been a lost expense, lost revenue, waste of money. But I do think that the 360 feedback is really helpful. We do ask our team members, tell us what we're doing right. Tell us one thing that we're doing well as a company, and then tell us another thing that we can do to improve what we're doing as a company. So it was great to hear that echoed in the feedback. And now I have an even more fine-tuned way to position that question the next time around. Thank you, Stephen.
That is
Well,
such an important point, Brenda. very good perspective, because you're exploring more into that employee rather than just what they are bringing to the table. You are exploring behind and what they now. Sometimes we give opportunities just because we don't have another person to take care of that, and then some people just bowl us over and like, wow, they did it so well. But in this case, you are actually making an effort to do that. That I wish other managers would do the same. That's really great.
Thank you.
You know, Atika, when I train salespeople, one of the things I always tell them that they should have for every sales call, every sales interaction, one of their objectives should be to learn one thing about the company and one thing about the individual that they're talking to. Now, I've taken that now with the people I coach in leadership and say, when you are having one-on-ones with your staff, whether they're feedback sessions or not, one of your objectives should always be, what's one thing you're going to learn about that person in that conversation? Now, I'm not talking about a 5-minute phone call or, you know, a quick project meeting update, but more the longer 30-minute or 20-minute one-on-one situations with an employee. One of your objectives should always be, what's one thing you're going to learn about this person as a person in this conversation?
You are bringing your human into
That's humanity. That's it. Because the thing is, Atika, we don't lead. Well, first of all, we don't manage people. We manage things. We manage processes, policies, procedures, projects. We lead people. We shouldn't be managing people. And then on top of that, when people who are leading are human beings. They're not assets. They're not resources. They're not head counts. They're human beings.
Exactly.
So we will become better leaders when we know more about the human beings we're dealing with. Go ahead, Christian.
So, yeah, Stephen, of course, I totally agree with you, but let me play devil's advocate for a moment and just say, well, it's really all about the bottom line. It's really all about the outcome of that particular conversation. You know, all this wishy-washy flower power kumbaya stuff. I don't really like that. That's not my style. Okay, fine. So my counter argument to that would be, if a person is preoccupied, like I said earlier, if a person isn't doing well, maybe health-wise, if a person is otherwise impacted or influenced by factors that are outside of this particular conversation, it's not going to be as efficient. And there you have your efficiency and your bottom line and your, you know, your accounting perspective part of the conversation. So you must look into what you just said, Stephen, in order to make it efficient, in order to get to that ROI, in order to get to the bottom line, to the, you know, dollars and cents that you got out of this particular conversation.
Well, I would counter argue, Christian, and you make very good points. And you know, these are guidelines. They're not, you know, yeah, I say do it in every meeting, but there are going to be times when you can't do it if the person's upset or you got a crisis going on in the company. You may not be able to do it. But the thing is that the more you know about the individual, the better you can lead them uniquely, and also the more that they think that you have a personal relationship, they're less. Remember, people leave bosses; they don't leave companies. So the chances of reducing your employee attrition increases highly. Yet then the cost of replacing lost employees is so significant in today's world. So you know, and I'm talking about just a simple, you know, and I'm not an open-ended "how are you" type question. Sometimes you can follow up, like for instance with you, Christian, I might say something along the line, hey, I understand college is back in session. How's your daughter doing? What was her first week of school like?
Yeah,
You can answer that in 20 seconds. And
that's
then
right.
I can build on that.
Terrific. It was terrific.
Right? Yeah, terrific. What? And if I have time, I might follow it up by saying,
Yeah.
what made it so terrific for? What did she say to you?
Yeah.
And see, you're smiling, you're happy,
Yeah.
and now I can
Yeah.
get into the conversation because I built a bit of rapport with you at the beginning of the conversation. So yeah, I'm not talking about, we don't need to be marriage counselors. I'm not trying to dig into people's issues, people's problems. They have, you know, everyone has something in their life. I think Ken mentioned that earlier. Maybe it was you, but just to understand a bit about that person, because we are leading a human being. We're not leading a robot.
And
Just to
if you
tie in
have a
on these,
crisis,
points. I'm sorry, go ahead, Kristen.
and if you have, just to follow up on that, if you then have a crisis and you can't do it, and yeah, of course, there's situations like that, what you do have is a foundation. You do have a foundation from other conversations. So everybody, and this is an example that it reminds me of what you said earlier about the visit to the museums that you didn't want to do, right? If you had done that, then if you really don't have time, nobody's going to be upset because you've shown that you are interested in another conversation.
I was
Exactly.
just going to say to tie the points together, to be an effective leader and a coach, we want to make sure we understand our employees as individuals.
Mhm.
And among other aspects about them that we want to understand is we want to understand what are their needs. Needs are motivational. Unfilled needs, unmet needs are motivational for sure. You're hungry, it's going to motivate you to eat. If you come to work with a high need, you have an employee, for example, with a high need for achievement, and we have a position that's very structured, very predictable. Here's how you do it. That person is not going to have his or her achievement needs met on the job. Unmet needs being motivational, they will take steps to get those needs met, satisfied, possibly and most likely by either trying to get a transfer or going to another company. So we want to understand our employees' needs. Do they have a need for security, stability, for growth, for achievement? What are they bringing? And then to structure the job in a way that will help them meet their needs. And that will be how they're motivated. They'll come far more from within, and certainly not just, as Stephen said, quote, managing somebody, creating an environment for them to succeed and meet their needs. The achievement needs are there. What can we do to create an environment in which those needs will be met? How can I structure this job so this high need achievement individual can meet those needs and continue to grow and thrive in this company? So it's getting to know our employees as individuals, again, without prying into a bunch of personal stuff. And a lot of their behavior will give us great insight into their actual needs. If I come to a company and say, I'm really motivated to lead, I'm a leadership-oriented person, my work history, my hobbies, nothing shows any inclination or interest in leading, that's more telling than what a person simply says. Human behavior is very revealing about what our needs are and the needs of our employees. We want to keep an eye on that as we are in leadership and coaching positions with them.
Thank you so much, all of you. This has been a great broadcast, and you'll all get a copy of the video, but also the notes, because, well, Stephen, it's like a book, isn't it? all this
Everyone,
recording.
we're going to take your conversations and turn it into a book someday. But hey, I just saw something on my screen that popped up, and it kind of shows where we are in the world today. And because I've often said, and I didn't create this phrase, I heard it first from Steve Cadigan, the former chief human resources officer at LinkedIn, that the war for talent is over and talent is won. So today in Germany, there is a protest at Volkswagen because the Volkswagen leadership has announced that they are going to possibly close some factories for the first time in their history.
Yeah.
By the way, I wrote a book about the Volkswagen scandal, so I follow this very closely.
Mhm.
But the workers are protesting and they're waving banners which say, "We are Volkswagen, you are not." And that is a great message for leadership. So when they, as leaders, think about, well, we're the company, we're XYZ, we're the management team. Well, yes, and perhaps no. So I just love that. It came up. We are Volkswagen, and you are not.
Why not?
That is a great one. Yeah, I did notice that.
So I have some news, which is at first some bad, but actually when you get a setback, you create a new pathway. So the fourth edition of London Global Business News Conference had been scheduled for October 1. And there's a conflict within the bank, space needs, and so that HSBC is a host facilitator and will continue that, but in early in the new year rather than October 1 in person. However, what I'm doing on October 1 is doing this, a video version, virtual, and with whoever wants to be involved. And it will go worldwide. And more about that later. Also, just as a calendar note, October 22 is a Tuesday, and I'll be in person, not on video as of now anyway. And our host facilitator is a global law firm called Mayer Brown. And they have fabulous offices at 1999 K Street, which is the heart of Lobbyistville and law firms. And so they hosted me in their offices this past February 1 in person, and it was well-attended meeting, and that had a video component, and we'll probably do some of that again. And then currently scheduled for New York City in person and virtual is November 21. Now that date may be moved after Thanksgiving. Um, we're still negotiating things on that. And that's what I'll be doing in person. Everything else for the remainder of the year will be virtual, including Silicon Valley, San Francisco area, LA, San Diego, Texas, Chicago. Yes. Thank you all for being on the
Thank
show.
you.
Um,
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
One last thing, as you can see the logo here, this is from 1999 when the Global HR print magazine was distributed at SHRM conferences, where I had an exhibit booth and all that. And then it went into non-working for some years, and now I'm bringing it back virtually. And it's striking a chord, particularly outside the US. And so that's why I'm showing this now.
And
Build up.
Switzerland and US are right next to each other, right above your right shoulder.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, in fact, in the past years, I was hosted in Geneva and in Zurich, and also we were lucky enough to produce our live event at the Nestle World Headquarters in Vevey, Switzerland. I'm sure you're familiar with that town.
I am.
Yeah, yeah, it was really an honor to be able to do that. And the dual career issue was front and center on that. And at the time, the people from the Permits Foundation actually presented live because the HR people and the mobility people within Nestle Corp were very active in the spouse employment issues. And this was a very long time ago now. That I think it was 2008 or something like that. So someday we'll do that again in person, but it takes a lot to do in-person meetings these days, and a lot of people don't want to travel anymore, and some people do. And so it's really expensive to do, cash. That means we have to charge thousands of dollars for sponsorships and $200 or $300 a ticket. And a lot of people don't want to do that either. So therefore, I've become good at doing this. And that's the pathway that'll go forward, except for those live events that I've just mentioned. We were talking about doing a special event live in San Diego. Stephen has suggested a way to go because the National SHRM organization, Society of Human Resource Management, will be live inside the convention center. And usually there's 25,000 people walking around that convention center, for sure. And it's huge. So we are going to be involved with them, and we'll be doing some broadcasting connected with that. And that's late June, June 25. So thank you again for being on the show. Take care. Have a nice weekend.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Well, everybody,
you.
take care.
Thank you.
Thank you all.